Julius Erving, listed his all-time NBA team, okay? And he actually did two of them. His first NBA all-time team was all guys that played in the 60s and 70s. And then his second team was all of the guys in the 80s and 90s. And it was notable because there was one big name that Dr. J left off of this list. And everybody was wondering whether that it was a shot at the guy that he left off, or was it just the way he viewed his generation and the guy that he played with in the NBA's annals. On his first team, NBA first team, again, like I said, he had guys from the 60s and 70s. Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Elgin Baylor. Look, if you're going to break things up into that era of the NBA versus the modern era, you could understand that list. If you're going to take away the Magics and Birds and Jordans, then that list is the best of the 60s and 70s. Robertson, West, Wilt, Russell, Baylor. Can't argue there. But then we get to the second team. The second team is the guys, again, from the 80s and 90s. And he has Michael on the list, of course. He's got Magic on the list, of course. He's got Kareem on that list. Totally understandable. Kareem, woefully underrated by many as one of the greatest NBA players ever. And then he puts on Larry Bird and Karl Malone. The glaring omission in the top 10 guys ever in the NBA's history, according to Dr. J, who's one of the greatest players ever, is that LeBron does not make the list. That LeBron does not make one of the top 10 players in NBA history. He joined Posted Up, the podcast, via Yahoo Sports with Chris Haynes, and explained his decision. Here's Dr. J.
Well, you look at, LeBron and, anybody he sort of picks with him to be, playing with so many guys. He's the guy who has led the charge in terms of super teams being put together. Yeah. When he put together a team in Miami, basically put together a team together in Cleveland as well, and put together a team in Los Angeles or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he could pick his own team. I ain't gonna pick his team. Yeah. I ain't saying nothing bad about LeBron.
Yeah, I'm not saying LeBron would argue, because I know he would probably come back to me, but he will argue that these super teams always existed. If you look at all the championship teams, they've always had 2, 3, or even sometimes 4 All-Stars.
Players weren't picking their own teams.
Dr. J, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you make me have to criticize you because I love you, Dr. J. Let me give you a little background into teenager high school DA. I loved Dr. J, and he was really before my time. I remember just the tail end of his career with the 76ers of the 80s. I was not alive in the 70s when he was flying and skywalking for the Nets and the Sixers. So I only know Dr. J through old grainy footage and old highlights and magazine profiles and pictures, etc. But damn, do I love Dr. J. Do I love seeing that badass ABA basketball and that huge head and afro and those high socks and him gliding through the air, the up and under swim layup, the tomahawk jam. I mean, all of those things I love. And, when I was a kid, I collected comic books as well. So you get an old Spider-Man comic book, an old, Hulk's comic book or something, and there's the old advertisements in there, and there's the cartoon Dr. J, buy Dr. J's sneakers and buy the Dr. J basketball. And Dr. J always just totally commanded my imagination. And so when I was in high school, I bought a Dr. J throwback jersey, an old Nets jersey with the red and blue stripes and the stars on the side, and I loved that jersey. Loved that jersey. And at the time, there was kind of a renaissance for Dr. J back in the mid-'90s, let's say. And at one of my Foot Lockers or one of those places in the mall, they had a life-size Dr. J, black and white, 1976 NBA slam dunk contest, I believe, and he is flying through the air, arm extended with the ball, black and white, cardboard cutout, fold up, promoting that line of sneakers. And I went into that store and said, when this promotion is over, can I have this cutout? I said, I will buy it from you. I have to have this life-size Dr. J black and white cardboard cutout in my bedroom. And sure enough, they gave it to me when the promotion was over. I came back with my car at night. They gave it to me. I brought it out of the back, and I had a life-size cutout, Dr. J, black and white, soaring through the air in my little high school bedroom, and I loved it. And I loved Dr. J. And today, for me to wake up and have to criticize Dr. J gives me absolutely no pleasure, and I really wish I didn't have to do it. But it is so stupid to say that you can't put LeBron on one of the top 10 player spots all time because of super teams, when in the list there are guys that played on the same team. He put Jerry West and Wilt Chamberlain on the first team. They played together. So he's saying two of the greatest players ever were on the same team, and they get a pass, but LeBron doesn't. He also put on the second team Kareem and Magic. They played together. And so they get a pass. They're allowed to be the greatest players ever, even though they're clearly on a super team. If two of the 5 greatest players ever or 2 of the 10 are on the same team, they don't get marked down, but LeBron does because he picked the team. So because Magic had the good fortune to get drafted by a Lakers franchise that already had Kareem, and because Jerry West was on a Lakers franchise that acquired Wilt Chamberlain, then they get a pass. But LeBron doesn't? Like, look, there was an argument to be made here by Dr. J. He could just say that I stopped ranking guys that didn't play, that played after the 2000s. That LeBron's career is not over. Let's wait to see where he finishes, and then I could change him around because his 2 lists are all guys. The last guy that played on this list was Karl Malone in 2004. So, okay, you want to make the argument that Kobe and Shaq and LeBron, I don't have a place for them because they're too recent. This is guys from when I played. Totally, you can make that argument. Again, Shaq and Kobe and Michael and Duncan are not on these 2 lists for Dr. J, so fine. LeBron doesn't factor into those eras. But don't leave him off because he's been on super teams. That is so stupid when you have guys that are on your list from those super teams. Wait, so you're not going to consider the Showtime Lakers with Magic and Kareem, 2 of the greatest 5 players ever, and James Worthy, a Hall of Famer. That doesn't register as a super team. There's 3 of the greatest players ever. Doesn't register. Michael plays with Scottie and Dennis Rodman. Those are 3 of the greatest basketball players ever. Doesn't register as a super team. West and Wilt play in the same team together. They go to finals after finals. Elgin Baylor as well, he's got on this list. That's also a Jerry West teammate. I mean, so a Lakers team of the early 70s that has Baylor, West, and Wilt. Doesn't matter. Not a super team. But LeBron with Kyrie and Kevin Love is? I can't believe today I had to wake up and criticize one of my favorite players ever. It's just not that. It should not be that type of day. Unfortunately, it is. But come on, Julius. Come on. Don't make me do this. But now you're making me do this. This is like Merez getting embarrassed out of the Daniel Jones jersey mid-show and having to run to the closet to change it. He didn't want that to be his day. He didn't want to wake up today and feel self-conscious about his Daniel Jones decision. But instead, because we brought up some, shall we say, interesting dynamics of the cut of that jersey and the aesthetics of that jersey, he had to run to the closet and change it up for what appears to be a Brandon Jacobs jersey. And, you know, he didn't want that to be his day. He didn't want to wake up and choose violence, but he did. And I didn't want to wake up and choose criticizing Dr. J, but he left me no choice.